How she found myself. Chapter 1. The news. I remember the moment they told me as if it were frozen in glass, sharp, cold, and impossible to touch without cutting myself open. My sister Josephine came to me first. Her hands were trembling, and I knew before she spoke that something had shattered in the world beyond our quiet home. She knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in hers with such careful tenderness that my heart, my weak, unreliable heart, began to pound. "There's been an accident," she whispered. "A terrible accident at the railroad." The words that followed seemed to come from very far away. My husband's name was on the list. They had been so careful to confirm it. Richards, our dear family friend, had been at the newspaper office when the intelligence came. He had seen it himself, checked twice, then rushed to our home to be certain Josephine would break the news gently, as if any words could be gentle when they're tearing your world apart. I wept, of course. Great, wild sobs that shook my whole body. Josephine held me, and I could feel her own tears falling into my hair. This was what was expected. This was what any devoted wife would do. And I was devoted, wasn't I? I had been devoted for so many years. When the first storm of grief passed, I pulled away from her embrace. I needed to be alone. I couldn't breathe in that room with their pitying eyes watching me, waiting for me to collapse entirely. "Let me go to my room," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Please. I need to be alone." Josephine protested, her face creased with worry. She was thinking of my heart, of course. Everyone was always thinking of my heart. "I need to be alone," I repeated, more firmly this time. And so I climbed the stairs to my room, each step heavy with the weight of what I was supposed to be feeling. Chapter 2. The window. I sank into the comfortable armchair that faced the open window. Outside, the world was obscenely beautiful. Spring had arrived while I wasn't paying attention, and now it pressed itself against my window like an unwanted guest. The tops of the trees were aquiver with new life. I could smell the rain that still hung in the air from an earlier shower, fresh and clean and full of promise. Somewhere in the distance, someone was singing, a peddler maybe, hawking his wares with a cheerful tune that seemed to mock my grief. Birds were building their nests in the eaves. I could hear them chirping, their voices bright and busy with the work of living. The sky beyond my window was patched with blue between the clouds, and I stared at it, exhausted, feeling as though my soul had been wrung out like an old cloth. There was something rising in me. I could feel it approaching, moving through the air outside my window, reaching toward me. I tried to push it back, to focus on my grief, on the proper emotions of a new widow, but it kept coming, inevitable as the spring itself. My breathing came quick and shallow. A faint whisper escaped my lips, though I barely recognized my own voice. What was this feeling? This thing that shouldn't be there, that had no right to exist in this moment of loss. Chapter 3. The Awakening. I sat very still, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. Young, I felt young again. My pulse beat fast and hot through every inch of my body, as if I were waking from a long sleep. The tears had stopped. I found myself staring out at that patch of blue sky with a strange intensity, and slowly, so slowly, I began to understand what was happening to me. "Free," I whispered. The word felt dangerous in my mouth. Free, free, free. My heart was racing now, not with fear or grief, but with something else entirely, something I had forgotten existed. The vacant stare that had clouded my eyes was replaced by a keen awareness. I could see everything so clearly now, the trees, the sky, the shape of my life spreading out before me. I tried to push it back. This terrible, wonderful realization. I told myself it was monstrous to feel this way with my husband barely cold. But the feeling was stronger than my guilt, stronger than years of proper behavior and dutiful affection. He had loved me, I knew that, and I had loved him sometimes, often, even, but what did that matter now against this overwhelming sense of liberation that was flooding through me? I thought of the years ahead, years that belonged to me now, to me alone. No one to live for during those coming years. I would live for myself. The thought was so foreign, so extraordinary, that I almost laughed. Free, body and soul free. I kept whispering. Chapter 4. The Vision. I saw them stretching before me, those years. Spring days and summer evenings and winter mornings. All of them mine. I could make my own choices now. I could have my own thoughts without measuring them against someone else's opinions. I could want things, foolish things, impractical things, my own things without explaining or justifying or apologizing. Don't misunderstand me, he had never been cruel. My husband was a kind man. A good man by all accounts. His hands had always been gentle, his intentions, always loving. But there had been a his will, always bending mine to match it. Love, I realize now, doesn't make that burden lighter. Sometimes it makes it heavier, because you carry it willingly, thinking it's what you're supposed to do. And now I didn't have to carry it anymore. I thought of all the decisions that would be mine alone. What to eat for breakfast, whether to travel or stay home, when to speak and when to be silent. They seemed like small things, perhaps, but they were everything. They were the substance of days, the building blocks of a life. The spring air came through the window, carrying with it the scent of new grass and distant flowers. I breathed it in deeply, feeling it fill my lungs, my blood, my very bones. I was alive. I was free, and the years ahead gleamed like precious stones, each one mine to spend as I chose. I could take up painting again. I could read late into the night without worrying about disturbing anyone. I could leave doors open or shut them. I could be silent or loud. I could be myself, whoever that was. Perhaps I would finally find out. A monstrous joy held me. I acknowledged it, even as I trembled with the recognition. Yes, there would be grief. There would be moments when I would weep over the face I had loved, lying still and cold. But beyond that bitter moment, I could see a long procession of years that would belong to me, absolutely. Chapter 5. The Interruption. A knock at the door shattered my reverie. Louise. Josephine's voice was anxious, pleading. Please open the door. You'll make yourself ill. What are you doing in there? Ill? I almost laughed. I had never felt more well in my life. I was drinking in the elixir of life through that open window. My imagination was running riot, sketching out days and months and years of freedom. Go away. I called out. I'm not making myself ill. But she kept knocking, kept pleading, and finally I rose from my chair. I felt light, as if I could float down the stairs. There was a feverish triumph in my eyes, and I carried myself like a goddess of victory. I opened the door to Josephine's worried face and took her arm. Together we began to descend the stairs. Richards was waiting at the bottom, standing near the door. And then, Chapter 6. The Return. The front door opened. Someone was coming in with a latchkey. It was my husband. He stood there, travel-stained, carrying his gripsack and umbrella, looking very much alive and utterly bewildered by Richard's quick motion to screen him from my view. But it was too late. I had seen him. I heard Josephine's piercing cry. I heard Richard's sharp shout. But they seemed to come from another world, one I had already left behind. My husband was alive. The telegram had been wrong. There had been no accident, or he hadn't been on that train, or some other mundane explanation would emerge. He was alive, and he was home, and he was looking at me with confusion and concern. And in that instant, every year I had just claimed for myself vanished like morning mist. The future I had imagined, the mornings of quiet breakfast and afternoons of wandering where I pleased, dissolved into nothing. The self I had just discovered, barely an hour old, died before it could take its first real breath. I felt something break inside me, not my heart though, that's what they would say later. It was something else, something more essential, the part of me that had just learned to hope. Chapter 7. The Ending. They said I died of heart disease, of joy that killed. The doctors were so certain. My poor weak heart, they explained, had given out from the overwhelming happiness of seeing my husband alive. The shock of joy had been too much for my fragile constitution. Josephine wept. Richard stood pale and shaken. My husband, bewildered by the whole affair, could only stare at what remained of his wife. But I could have told them, if I could still speak. It wasn't joy that killed me. It was the death of that hour, that single, perfect hour when I had discovered who I might have been. When I had tasted a freedom so complete, so absolute, that returning to my old life was simply impossible. My body understood what my mind had known the moment I saw him standing in that doorway. I could not go back. I could not unknow what I had learned about myself in that quiet room upstairs. So my heart made the only choice left to it. It stopped. And perhaps that was a kind of freedom too. Epilogue. If this story has touched something in you, if you've ever felt the weight of living for others, or wondered who you might be, if you could choose freely, or recognize that small, fierce voice inside that whispers, "What about me?" then perhaps you found something valuable in this hour we've spent together. Life asks so much of us. It asks us to be dutiful, to be kind, to consider others before ourselves. And these aren't bad things. But sometimes, in the midst of all that giving, we forget that we, too, deserve to live. We deserve to know ourselves, to honor our own desires, to claim our own time. It's never too late for that discovery. Whether you have an hour or a decade, the truth remains you are worth knowing. Your life is worth living on your own terms. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it. Like this video, subscribe for more stories that speak to the complexity of being human, and share it with someone who's still searching for their own hour of freedom. Thank you for spending this time with me. May you find your moment, and may you have the courage to claim it.